Lesley. Lesley is the Associate Director for Design Thinking and Social Impact and Professor of Practice at the Tulane University. And she'll be talking to us a little bit about how it is that we can combine design thinking in the law in co-creating new futures. So Lesley, I'd love to ask you to maybe briefly introduce yourself in your own words and give us a sense of what brought you to do the work that you're now doing.
So I'm from Trinidad and Tobago. More Trinis in the house, right? And I'm an industrial designer. I've lived in a lot of different places. Like I lived in Brazil, I lived in a few places in East Africa. And I guess the design that I have always been involved in has been about development and equity and change. And so what I do today at Tulane is about leading design for change. We root a lot of the problems that we work on in the Sustainable Development Goals. I mean, we use them as a starting point, and then we're looking to see, well, okay, how can we make, this is very light and airy, how can we make the world a better place? So I think that there is a lot in common with I hope that there's a lot in common with the way that lawyers think, but we do it in a very different way in design.
Right, wonderful. And I'm curious to hear a little bit more about how exactly you do that. You have a presentation prepared for us, I
I
hear?
have a presentation, so I'm
Yes.
gonna start sharing my screen.
Great, and it's working. We can see your screen.
You can see
Awesome.
lots of things on my screen, and let me go into presentation mode. All
Perfect.
right,
So
you're
just,
still seeing my screen okay, yes?
yeah, we can see it. Perfect.
All right, great. So this talk is about combining design and law to co-create new futures. And the reality is I can talk about this for hours. So Samir, you might want to keep me in check every now and again to make sure I don't talk for hours, so we could have some conversation later on. But the first thing I want to do, I'm from the Caribbean, so I want to just start off with a dancing smiley because I can, a dancing gif. If what is one good thing from a new normal, or what positive change has this experience brought for you? And if people could put it in the chat, I'd love to see. Let me see how to set up the chat so I can see it as well. Oh, I don't know if you're hearing me then. Clearly, I see somebody's internet is dropping out, and my internet is sometimes a bit slow. But for me, one positive change that this experience has brought, right, so Samir says more control of my schedule, meeting others is a good thing in this conference. For me, the positive change that this has brought is that I have I have the space or the legitimate sanction to work with my colleagues all over the world at this time. I don't have to get on a plane to go and work with people, and we can work remotely and no one's asking any questions, so like every day I'm in like 3 different time zones, and I think that that's great, and design thinking often starts in this really, really super positive place. And so I thought, let's just start with something like that. But the question that we want to talk about today is how might we combine design and law to co-create new futures? And so I have this quote by Adrienne Marie Brown that I like to refer to every now and again. When I wondered if imagination could be necessary for revolution and transformation, you said yes. You said our dreams matter, our visions matter, and they are the way that we make oppression temporary. And I do focus in the work that I do as a designer on somehow combating what's called like the matrix of domination or different levels of oppression in the work that we do. And I think that that's where we could find a good role to work with lawyers to move things forward. So just a quick thing, I know that there's one other talk about design thinking, but I'm gonna say, what is design thinking? And I have a tomato up there because why not? And a dancing man because why not? Because actually in my in-person sessions, there would be music in the background and people and dancing and stuff like that. And of course, there are lots of post-it notes, but it's a little bit more than that. I'll read the bottom definition. Design thinking is a collaborative, human-centered approach to creating innovation and social change. And then actually I'll pick a bit from the top, and we're using methods from design, social sciences, development studies, etc., to address complex social issues. Not all designers are focusing on social issues, but certainly I do in the work that I do. We use both design mindsets and design process. And that's sometimes where there's a little bit of tension, because, you know, art and design education is very different to legal education or engineering education. So it means that in a lot of the classes that I teach, I'm trying to get people to be curious, collaborative, creative, questioning, responsive, iterative, empathetic. I want people to be active. So they need to do, they have to move out of, you know, we jokingly say, yes, we talk about design thinking, but there's also design doing. And I am trying to get people to do both. And then we, in the work that we do at Tulane, and in my work in general, we're trying to focus on change. I'm going to show you the simplest design process as possible, which is this understand design test. People often think that, oh, we have to be using the Stanford model or the IDEO model of design thinking. And I actually like to separate those branded models from what we do in design thinking. It is about doing some research and really understanding people, then going into design and then doing something and then testing that. And I add something else to it, where I'm always asking people about the future and the future that we want, and how do we co-design that. So I emphasize in the design thinking that I do, I emphasize co-design and utopia, and I use a framework called critical utopian action research. If there are any Scandinavians in the room, you may have heard of this before. And we ask then, what is wrong? Where do we want to go? And then how our dreams can become reality. And the thing is, that part, that last question, then we try to do through design. So we design a response or a way to get to where we want to go. So I want to just show you very quickly how this design thinking process might go. And I'm using an actual workshop that I did where we collected some responses, and I'm sharing these responses. So in the understand phase, and because we are all maybe in a little bit of a lockdown phase, I decided to show you some photographs of New Orleans, where I live in, as we move along, right? So we start off looking at one human very often in design thinking. And I know that might be different, or it may be the same. It might be different to the way that some lawyers think, but in design, we think we get good information when we focus on one person. So I've shown you here this one little human who I'm going to call Zion, who is 12, and he's stuck at home because of the coronavirus, and he's cut off from friends, school, parks, etc. And then we may also look at some people in Zion's network. Zion has given us some focus, and we're looking at their needs, behaviors, contexts, cultures, and the system around them. So his teacher, his baby sister, his mother, his grandfather, other people. Then the next areas that we're trying to figure out what are some of their concerns. Zion misses places, he doesn't have good internet, he's scared of getting the virus and some others. His mother is worried about his education, social interactions, mental well-being. And so we got this information, but also the process we used was a collaborative method to do this research. So this was a workshop with about 20 people where we were putting in these this information together using Mural, because this was already during the pandemic. So this was remote collaboration. Zion's teacher is worried, is he learning anything? Does he have internet at home? Is there release for social energy? And then what did we do? We took all of that, and then we created an actionable problem statement where we say our user Zion, or one of his relatives, needs a way to communicate with his friends because of, or in spite of, because his family is following stay-at-home orders. Then we chose one issue. How might we support communication for Zion while at home? Then we would move into design phase. And our group of people, which was a non-technical group of people, it came up with these ideas: drive by, call on FaceTime, Zoom dates, write letters, build a hugging suit. That was a nice one. Visit through a glass window, which we're doing, and all of that. But imagine the ideas we could have had and the actions we could take if lawyers and policymakers joined us in our group brainstorming. Our ideas are always much better when we have the people with the technical ability, whether it's the lawyers, the engineers, whether they join our spaces, okay? Because for me, as someone working in design and design thinking, the really frustrating thing is that, so I work in a co-creative, collaborative mode. I'll bring together 30 people and we'll come up with a portfolio of wonderful ideas, including policies. So we're co-creating policies, but then we can't move them forward because we didn't have the engineering team with us. We didn't have the city officials. We didn't, and so the frustrating thing is our ideas sometimes just stay. But if we had the lawyers, the city officials join us in our work, then we'd have actionable solutions around internet access, childcare policies, education policies, healthcare eviction, workers' rights, access to healthcare. We would have heard these things when we did our research, and then the specialists, which are you guys, could help us move things forward. And so I'm hoping that we could bring together participatory design and co-creation and this creative way of working, community experts, legal practitioners, and public officials to move towards future dreams and social change. And our lives will never be the same after 2020. And so it's time to redesign them. We know it's time to redesign them, and we do need lawyers in the process. So I'll show you some other ways that we could use this. This is a photograph from Trinidad, Laventille. I've asked people in the Caribbean, I've thrown out this challenge and said, where are some of the pain points and highlights of people in the community? And how can you work with others to help eliminate pain points or ensure highlights? And again, if we had lawyers involved in the conversations or even looking at the designs afterwards, we could help move some of the policies that people want forward. I did a workshop with the NOPD, that's the New Orleans Police Department, where we asked a question: can we use design and the future to build shared experiences between the police and the community? And then I'm gonna start showing a video, and then maybe we don't have enough time to show the whole thing.
After getting to know the people behind the badge, I see that there are still people that care.
So today we focus on empathy, and I think that both the community participants and the police participants definitely reached a place where they got tools to learn to empathize more with other people. And these are tools that I hope that they would continue to use later on, interviewing skills, really trying to take the perspective of other people. I think that, or I hope that they will continue to use these different elements of design thinking later on in their professional lives.
I think that these kind of learning experiences are really important to bring us as police officers out of our mindset that we get used to thinking in, and reconnect us to the people in the community and the reasons why we chose this profession to begin with.
Today's workshop is centered around building a bridge between NOPD and the community. It's unfortunate for us in the community, we're not totally aware of what the criteria is that NOPD has to work with. So it was important today for us to educate them on the things that we expect to have in the community.
meetings like these show me that police did the best they can and are doing the best they can. They show me that police aren't my enemy, that police aren't the ones I should be running and fearing from. That even though me being a little skeptical, it kind of gave me a step closer towards police and saying that it's not everything. It's not the fear that we all have hyped about.
I've got to learn as an officer what it is that the community want and what can I focus on to make the community better as being a police officer. So with the experience, I just hope in the next 6 months that I keep learning and working with those people in the community to make myself a better officer to help the community that we serve.
Okay, all right, so I showed you that video where you could see that we actually did this work. Sometimes when I do design thinking work, I am actually focusing on the solutions. And sometimes when I do design thinking work, I'm really more focused on building relationships. You heard one of the people in the video talk about building a bridge, you know, because the thing is, we start design thinking with empathy, and at least if we can get to that place of empathy and working together, then we can move to other things afterwards. We'll have a play shop on Tuesday, where if you want to try out some of these methods, I'll actually create a question and have people work in groups, and we'll go through the entire process in 90 minutes. I'm going to end off with this quote: "If you want to change a story that justifies power and privilege, you must have bold goals and specific steps. And one must be in a space where one can ask, what is a better way to do this?" So maybe my challenge to lawyers is there a better way of doing the work that you're doing? And is there a way that people, this kind of creative practice can influence what you do? And a little bit of a shameless plug, I'll drop some links in the chat, but I do have, I have a product that's a tool for reflection for designers about critical theory. And then I just launched an app, and I'll drop both links in the chat. And then now we could, let's see, am I still sharing? Yes, I'm still sharing. Stop share. Okay. And so Samir, I'm waiting for your questions now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lesley, for sharing that presentation and your thoughts. And I'm looking forward to those tools that you created. They look really quite fascinating. So please do share. My first question to you, Lesley, is, well, you know, a lot of lawyers and people sort of in this room and part of our community are working on some really difficult problems and challenges in the world, right? These systemic, you know, wicked problems that, you know, are just so difficult sometimes to find solutions to. So my question to you is, how is it that you would advise us to find lightness in approaching some of these problems and not get overwhelmed by the severity of them?
So designers also work on wicked problems, and I've read literature that says that one skill that we have as designers is that we break down the wicked problems into manageable parts, and therefore we do not get overwhelmed. We're not trying to solve the entire wicked problem. That's why we focus on the one human, because, you know, focusing on that one person, we are going to find issues that are generalizable. Whereas if you are focusing on everybody, that sounds terrible for me, I suppose to say, but when you try to focus on everybody at the same time, in design, we believe that actually you cannot design anything that is good or worth, your design is going to be what we say is wishy-washy if you're trying to solve for everybody at the same time, okay? So what I try to do with my students in design is I try to coach them to focus on actually the person with the most problems, you know, or the problems that definitely have to be solvable. So like, that's why we start off looking at oppression. We start off looking at who's not being served well. And we're just trying to focus on how can we just make one thing better for this person who is really poorly served by the society that we live in. And so I know it's a different way. It's probably a different way to the way lawyers work. I was saying when I came into the room, I was saying I know there might be some tension because I worked with a lawyer for 10 months and we were always locking horns. But actually, there are lawyers who are using this approach. Stanford has a legal design lab. And I have a colleague in Botswana. I just remember her first name right now, Ritabali. And she's also working with law and design and using these creative processes in the work that she's doing.
I'm curious to hear a little bit more about why you were bumping horns with this lawyer. What were some of the tensions that existed between your approaches?
Some of what we do looks crazy, as designers, and it's that we are trying to create space for inspiration from different sources, and I think so. One place that we were locking horns is like I think he wanted the work to follow a certain path, he would say very often, well, I need to see the precedent. And actually in design, we're not looking for the precedent because we're looking for change. And if you focus on the precedent, you can't get to change because the change that you need hasn't happened yet. And so in design, we're saying, okay, what's the problem? And we're just going to go forward and make change. And, he would always say, okay, but has this been done before? And where's the precedent? And who's written about it? And, stuff like that. And it was, but I know that there are other lawyers who are doing this, who are working in this creative space.
Well, I can tell you from what I've been hearing at the summit is that a lot of lawyers are acknowledging the fact that with some of the complex challenges we're facing, there is no precedent, as you're saying. So we need to find new approaches. And that's why it's inspiring to hear from you that this, design thinking approach, well, it can actually be applied to the law and much more. I'd like to invite people in the room. If you have any questions for Lesley, please put them in the chat so we can get to them if anything bubbles to mind. And while people do that, I'd like to ask you as well, Lesley. So just before this talk, we were talking with Professor Guy Standing, and he posed us a question of how we can shape the political paradise. So I know you have used sort of utopia as a sort of generative image before. So could you talk a little bit about that and why utopia, or how does that serve the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I heard him talk about the political paradise, and I thought, oh, good, I like that space, because utopia is where I've been doing a lot of work. So I tend to work with people from marginalized or oppressed backgrounds, and or I'm not even going to say backgrounds, but who are living in marginalized contexts, and then sometimes it's hard to get people into that generative space because they'll start saying, well, America's not designed for Black people, and women aren't going to get any more rights, or and so the utopia is a way of us imagining this world where everything is possible. So it's the way that I've been just trying to get people to think above all of the limitations that are holding us back. And very often I even set my design class in far in the future, 2050, 2070, the year 2090, so that people can't limit themselves by, okay, we have all of these problems today, and then I can't come up with a solution because we know that society is awful and whatnot. So it's just to push people forward.
Right. And I can imagine there must be, as you were sharing, there must be some resistance to doing that, when you have all these beliefs and assumptions about how things are, to believe that things are possible. But I think that's really what's needed right now.
Yeah.
For us to really
Actually, I know you're going to ask me a question, but I'm going to add something to it. So
Please.
I've also started to use, that's why my workshops are very playful. I've started to use a little bit of Afrofuturism. So you saw me drop in a slide from Wakanda. I've gone to class in like a superhero suit, and because you have to, we are dealing with oppression and domination and, you know, problems that are very, very heavy. But if we bring in this playfulness, if we get people to move out of the present, then we get to some solutions that make sense. And I know we have some questions, or I think in
Yeah,
the chat.
I do see some questions from the negotiators in the room. And the first one is from Libby that I'd like to read for you. So how would the design process address the problem of property rights, which is seen as the obstacle to rights of nature? Such a large construct. How to address this problem in the specific person context?
Actually, so I don't have any answers to that, and we never have any answers. And again, that's the thing that would frustrate my lawyer colleague, because we don't have answers. It's the process of us working together that creates the answer. And but actually, we did have this challenge because we were dealing with the ocean, and I was trying to say, well, okay, we need to focus on people in the ocean, and my lawyer colleague said, no, the ocean is part of the commons, and but the thing is, people won't care unless there are people issues involved. That's the way that I think, you know, as a designer, as someone who's using anthropology methods. And so, you know, the issue of property rights and obstacles to the rights of nature, I believe, so I've moved away from the field of design and say, if we're talking about some of this in a selfish, human-centered way, I think we could get more people involved in and supportive. And if it doesn't look like the rights of nature over the rights of poor people, for example, you know, because I think that that's sometimes part of the discussion. You know, well, poor people can't have this because we need whatever, and you can't have those conversations. It can't be so binary or zero sum, or, you know, and if we can emphasize that there are people in the process, then maybe there'd be less resistance.
And I see another question here from Rhiannon, which is, why do lawyers need to embrace design thinking? What would you say to that?
I will say that we cannot solve the problems, and I'm sure plenty of people have said this today. I think the last speaker said this. I think you might have said this, Samir. We can't solve the problems in this new normal with the tools that we had before. And we have to just experiment with different tools. Design thinking may not be the answer, but at least it would have been us saying, well, okay, and that's even one of the qualities of design thinking. It's experiment, let's try something out, because the old things, a lot of them aren't working. Some things work, of course, but some things don't work, and we need some new approaches and new ways of working. And so then this is another new, a new thing to try out.
Right, and I think it would be very valuable for us to do that. I see Juliana has asked another question. How could lawyers be helped by designers in having a more long-term future approach in thinking about processing issues? So how can design help in thinking longer term?
So let me think. So I mean, I just think of it the way that I work now. Like I think that legal design lab in at Stanford and the one in Botswana could be ways of doing this, you know, where we are helping in an experimental way, helping people to focus on long-term problems, the ways, and possibly the ways that I was mentioning, you know, like establishing problems in the far out future and things like that, to get people to not think about immediate issues, but to, you know, get them to think in a more longer term way.